Okay, so I want to quickly talk about your poetry anthology responses. Obviously, the poetry anthology is about 2 weeks away from being due, and I want to make sure that we do discuss this. A couple of things, obviously, just reminders. Number one is that each poem included in your poetry anthology must have a response. Okay, so you'll have 12 responses total. These are formal body paragraphs, which analyze poetry and aspects of the poetry. We have given you things like form and structure to analyze, elements of TP cast, parts of figurative language. We're also going to be taking a look at sound devices here pretty soon. So all of these are parts of the poem that you can analyze. You can also analyze this poem in regards to any of the literary devices that we've also used as well. So things like theme or conflict, maybe there's foreshadowing in the poem. So we've given you a ton of things over the course of the year that you can use to analyze. Remember, you are coming up with the topic. You are coming up with what you're analyzing on your own. So just remember that as we go through. Now, there's a couple things that have also been shared with you. You've been given some examples of these poetry anthology responses. They've been uploaded into Google Drive. They're on Google Classroom. So I want to make sure you also understand that you have examples of good responses out there as well. This one document here in particular is a really good one that kind of gives you a different feel for what you can write about and also different ways to shape your poetry anthology responses. I also like this one because, again, here is the keys to writing a good response. These are suggestions that have been accumulated over the course of the years from my students. So I would suggest that you definitely look at this one. I believe it's in Google Drive. It's also been posted onto the stream. And these are just some things that I would like to talk about quickly with you in regards to these responses. Okay. So as we go through and we shape our response, first of all, just a reminder that this is obviously a formal body paragraph. So we are expecting the structure to be correct. Again, topic sentence, textual evidence, and then your analysis piece. We also expect that the rules of the formal essay are followed. Things like no contractions. Everything is written in present tense, no personal pronouns, etc. Again, these are all things we've been talking about throughout the year. And then we're also expecting you to follow correct MLA citation guidelines when you format, integrate, and cite your poems. And again, this is what one of your previous assignments was all about. So keep those things in mind. The second thing I just want to walk through are some of these keys that are listed. I think they're brilliant. I think they're very helpful, and they just help to create a strong response. Number one is please refer to the poem's title and the author in your topic sentence. So, for example, Shel Silverstein's Where the Sidewalk Ends, right? And then you can get into the main point that you are trying to make about the poem. Okay. It's also very clear in your topic sentence what you are writing about. So we've talked about all year long that your topic sentence needs to be clear and concise. So simple that a fourth grader could understand it. So make sure that the point you are making about the piece is very clear. Number three, again, just a reminder, you need to use textual evidence. You must use quotes from the text. A couple of things to remember. Number one is make sure you're integrating these quotes. So again, no naked quotes. We have discussed the 4 methods throughout the year. Make sure you're following them. Make sure you're adding context, things like who said it, what was going on, when, why did they say it, or you can also make a point. So for example, however, the mood quickly shifts. Okay. You must give a direct quote. You must have an example. Again, make sure that you are formatting them and also citing them correctly. And then the last part of your paragraph then needs to explain how the example proves your point. Okay. This needs to be the longest part of your paragraph, as we've talked about before. So again, just keep those rules of formal essay writing and the structure of it in your forethought as you're doing this. Also make sure that the quote is formatted correctly based on the number of lines. So a poem that is 3 lines or less is formatted much differently than a poem where you're using 4 lines or more. Review your MLA citation guidelines. Again, the formatting of the poems, the citation, the parenthetical citations, and then also a reminder, do not forget about proper spelling and grammar. Okay. Great suggestions here on using TPcast. Again, remember, you do not need to use all parts of the TPcast. You may only want to analyze maybe 1 or 2 aspects of it that you really want to focus on. So maybe you really want to focus on symbolism and theme. All right, so feel free to do that. You can also discuss a poem's form and structure. You can look at things like rhyme scheme, length of lines, grouping of lines, punctuation or lack of punctuation. You can identify poetic devices like figurative language or sound devices. It is imperative that you give examples of these devices when you're discussing them. So again, just make sure that you are, if you're talking about metaphors, you're able to actually show us, right, an example of a metaphor. So these are just some really good suggestions. Look them over. Look over the examples that you've been given, which I think are very helpful. What we have next here are just two examples of a response, and I kind of want to walk you through how I would kind of look at this and some of the comments that I would make, and then also talk about what kind of a grade this might receive if I were to give it a score out of 10. So first of all, let's read this. Tea for Two, A Tragedy by Pamela August Russell is a very interesting piece. So right off the bat, what I like is that this student has used the title and she's given us the author's name. When you put by Pamela August Russell, you must offset that with commas. Okay, we get into a little bit of a problem here at the end of the topic sentence, though, because she says it's a very interesting piece. The problem with that is we don't know what that exactly means. So why is it interesting? She needs to be very specific here. So her point needs to be a little bit more clear. It's not very clear what she means by interesting. Okay, but we do see then right away that she gets into the poem's title. So the poem's title alone evokes a lot of emotion in the reader and suggests that the piece will end tragically. So what we have right here is we have a little bit of a grammar issue. Should read piece will end in tragedy, not tragically. Okay. Again, we'll maybe talk about what, up here, what kind of emotion. The poem's main topic, let's use the key vocabulary that we have throughout the year. Again, I would challenge you to make sure that your poem responses are full of academic language. So instead of saying this poem's main topic, let's write this poem's thematic idea is loneliness. The short piece hints that the narrator, just real quick, this is a little thing to keep in mind when you're talking about poetry. It's never the narrator, it's always the speaker. Okay. The short piece hints that the speaker has become lost in their own loneliness. Only after they, and again, now she's using her quote, only after they poured the second cup, and again, I like how she puts the parenthetical citation right after it, did they realize that they were alone. This is really well done with the quote. A couple issues here. Number one is they use past tense. Did should be do, and were should be are. Again, we want to write in the literary present tense. So only after they poured the second cup do they realize that they are alone. And again, here's her quote. Again, using a quote with only one word is okay. She has her parenthetical citation. This realization implies that the narrator's friend, again, narrator should be speaker. The speaker's friend has abruptly left them without them even realizing it. This poem may represent the idea, again, don't like the idea, maybe the theme of refusing to admit or face that someone dear to a person has been lost. What was once a common occurrence between them, a cup of coffee, eventually makes the speaker feel that they have lost whoever usually drank the second cup of tea. This here is fine. Don't be afraid also, if you're doing this, that you also could put the parenthetical citation there. Again, just remember that the two would come before the period after the word tea. Okay? So overall, this is a decent response, kind of talking about the piece, and kind of what it means and what the theme is. Would have liked to have seen more done with the topic sentence. Okay, this probably for me, if it's a 10 score, would get a 9 out of 10. It's strong, needs some things to be cleaned up, but overall decent. The next response we're looking at is a response of a poem that somebody wrote. So again, this is your personal poem. This is your response to that. Again, not a whole lot changes as far as expectations. The structure of it, the use of quotes, how we format, how we cite, etc. All that stays the same. Probably the only thing that changes slightly is the rule of the formal essay, where you are allowed to use personal pronouns. So you'll see up here she writes, that I'm always questioning my identity because I lose who I am by trying to be someone else. So she's using personal pronouns, and that's okay. But you can see that sprinkled throughout, she has her quotes, and she has multiple quotes in here that she's using and integrating directly into lines. But she's also talking about the theme of her poem and what she was hoping that people would get out of it, and some of the symbolism that she's using. So what she's writing about is very similar to what she would analyze for a poem that she collected. So just wanted to show you these and look these over. This is overall a really good response for a personal poem. It was a good blend of personal reflection, kind of what she was writing about and why, and then also discussing some of the literary devices like symbolism and theme. So again, look that over. You can also, tell us the story about the poem and why you wrote it, who you wrote it for. But again, just remember, sometimes what happens with these is that students, for whatever reason, they do not include textual evidence because they think they're just writing about what the poem is about. You must have textual evidence in every response. So look these over. Again, there's a couple grammatical things here and there which you'll see as you look at it. But overall, two solid examples of responses. So look over those things that we've given you, those examples of other responses as well. If you have any questions about your own, let me know, and I would certainly be willing to look at one of them for you and give you some feedback. Thanks.